To start.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our first session of the February C3EB Summit, day 2. And we are kicking it off with an amazing speaker. So if you're here, let us know that you're here in the chat and engage with us. And before I introduce our speaker, just quick housekeeping notes. If you do need transcription-enabled session, we invite you to go to our Facebook page at www.facebook.com/C3EB Summit. For those of you who know me, you know accessibility is a huge deal for me. So while we could not make that happen on the Happen stage, we were able to figure out a solution by using Facebook. So if you or anybody that you know needs transcription services, this session is available on our Facebook page right now with transcription enabled. So you can just click on the closed captioning and experience this with us. And that being said, as your thoughts and questions come up, don't hesitate to put them in the chat. We are monitoring the chat, and I will be relaying all of the thoughts and questions to Chenae. And with that being said, that is who our first speaker is for today, Chenae Bullock. A little bit about Chenae before I hand off the mic and stage to her. Chenae Bullock, and I will let Chenae pronounce her traditional name and explain the meaning of it, because I think that really should, your lineage, Chenae, and your name, your meaning, I think that should come from you, because that's going to be more powerful. Chenae was raised in her traditional Native American culture. She has become a community leader as a water protector, cultural preservationist, and humanitarian. She dances the Eastern Blanket Dance, which is a traditional dance done regionally on the northeastern seaboard. She also sings and dances Eastern Algonquin social dances. With over 12 years as a museum professional, the foundation of her work has been based on the resurgence of the traditional canoe culture of the Northeast coastal Algonquin communities. From organizing historically sacred paddles in the ancient waterways of the northern seaboard to spreading awareness of the roles that Indigenous communities contribute to in ocean sustainability, internationally at places like the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University, the Earth Institute at Columbia Law School, and International Treaty Commission at the United Nations, Chenae has dedicated her life to the betterment of not only her community, but our earth. And today she is here to share with us some ancient wisdoms to leverage contemporary advances. Chenae, it is such an honor to have you as a part of the C3EB Family Summit and platform. Welcome, and the stage is yours.
Thank you. Nadesui Sakampanayu Mishunetu Usqua, Wachi Shinnecock, Wachi Siwan Hockey. My given name is I Lead Canoe. I am Butterfly Woman. I come from the island known to my people as the Fish Island because of its beautiful cultural landscape, because it's almost in the shape of a fish through its cultural landscape. And our sister tribes refer to this island as the Island of Shells because of our bountiful amount of puckwahog shells that produce the wampum, known to many of you as Long Island. I come from the Shinnecock Nation, which is the people of the Stony Shore, located in modern-day Southampton, New York. So I'm from the Island of Shells, and I'm really excited to be here to just really share, what I have been doing in my recent work as leveraging the ancient wisdom and contemporary advances. So I'd like to, yes. So I actually am the business owner of Mosquito Consulting. And I'd like to change the slide. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to change the slide here.
You actually have to go to your slides to change it from there, not this screen. Thank you.
Okay, so, okay. Just bear with me, I'm sorry. Yes, so once I can figure out how to actually change the slide. um, But yes, so what I'll be talking about is leveraging ancient wisdom and contemporary advancement. I am the owner of Mosquito Consulting. Mosquito Consulting is a cultural and preservation heritage firm, and we focus on reconnecting people back to the land. And I am really doing my best right now to figure out how to do this.
Do you see those arrows on the bottom?
I do, but when I can't click on them.
You have to do that from the slide window, not the stage window. You know how you pulled it up and you hit it?
Okay, so if I share my screen again, I apologize, everyone. I thought I had this, but I have it now. I'm sure everybody can see this now. So with Mosquito Consulting, so this is who I am. I am the business owner of Mosquito Consulting. As it was stated earlier, I am a cultural practitioner. I'm a young entrepreneur, but I'm also Native American. So what I'll be discussing a little bit with everybody today is really not just focused on, the Native American community, but I really want to help everybody be able to walk away with understanding that although we have differences, there's one thing that connects us all, and that is the land and the water. And today I'll be highlighting how Indigenous communities have always done business with this understanding of our interconnectedness. Here you see actually a photo of myself um, greeting the people of the high seas. They paddled all the way from the Polynesian islands into New York City. They sailed, it took them about 2 years around the world. And what happened was we all came together, all Indigenous people came together. And this is something that we've actually always been doing in the New York City area, but a lot of places of waterways. Because again, what connects us all is the land and the water. And today, all of us as humans are trying to get back to these traditional ways, so that way we can live in harmony, not only with on the earth and with the earth, but with one another. So that's a little bit about what we're discussing. But prior to that, I mean, before we kind of get into that today's part, it's very important to understand our tribal communities and our actual life ways, is what I have grown up to be calling them, is our traditional life ways of being the original stewards of this land. My people, who are known as people of the Stony Shore, um, we were semi-nomadic. So we didn't live, in in a home, at one time throughout the year. We lived in two different places here on the East Coast. We lived in the warmer months. We lived on the shore, and we fished and we harvested and we gardened. And of course, as it began to get colder, we moved inland, and we spent time, together with family and shared songs and stories and worked on things, preparing ourselves for the warmer months. Of course, we harvested with the seasons. So we lived in harmony with the earth. We didn't take too much from the earth that we didn't need. We always gave back. Corn, beans, and squash was really the staple of our diet. But we didn't really eat red meat throughout the entire year. We also fished and shellfished, we foraged and we hunted, and we preserved. So we ate with the seasons. So we were very much in harmony with what most people are calling climate change today. We were very much in harmony with how the earth was ever changing. We also traveled the world by carbon neutral vessels. So just like that picture I showed you before, that sailboat that the Hukalea Voyaging Society was on was also carbon neutral. So, not harming our water and the wildlife and the ecosystem within the water. We did those, traditions with carbon neutral canoes. Um, of course, we hunted and did shell fishing traditions as well. Skipping forward from pre contact into contact, you have what we call assimilation. This topic is, sometimes very sad, but unfortunately, a lot of these things still exist today, but just are very covered up. Um, in this photo is a photo of my ancestors who are Shinnecock. Although, due to the layout of this presentation, the script in the photo actually says the last of the Shinnecock Indians, 1884. And that right there is what we call, not called, but call paper genocide, which is a big reason as to why people communicate about Indigenous peoples in a very much past tense, and really only talk about us from this time going back. But a lot of things happened that caused forced assimilation. Of course, you had the Indian Removal Act, the boarding schools, which forced our young people to, no longer speak their language, believe in themselves as who they are, no longer be in harmony with the earth. But not only that, when you are forced to sell your lands, forced to lease lands, you had to stop the controlled burns that actually kept the soil very rich. We also, again, were stopped to fish and hunt in the ways that we did. So all the ways that we actually had been in harmony with the earth have stopped at this point in time. And today we're essentially fighting to bring back or rescind some of these laws, because it's not really just an indigenous issue. When we're not able to take care of the earth, it affects everybody, and we're seeing that today. um, so moving forward, sometimes when we talk about the past, it can be very a little sad, for people. But I think what's very important to note is the resiliency and the revival and the resurgence of our culture. Here's an amazing photo of the next generation in my clan, in my family, here on Shinnecock, at our powwow. This actually was the last powwow that we were able to gather prior to COVID and the pandemic. But these children, they are resilient. It's in their DNA. If you look at some of the things that I have on the side here, I want you to take a look at the Association of American Indian Affairs. Now, that was founded in 1922. It wasn't even until 1924 that Native Americans were even considered US citizens. So for our people to go through all of that, what we just talked about, the forced assimilation, um, for them to go through all of that, it's very important to note that they were still being resilient and diplomatic as tribal people to form an organization that focused on Indian affairs prior to being US citizens. And of course, you have the National Congress of American Indians, which started in 1944, and they create policies um, dealing with Indigenous issues. And that's still in existence today and thriving. Of course, you had the American Indian Movement in 1968, the what is known as UNDRIP in 2007, the Indigenous Peoples Movement, which is more of a global organization to really stop the injustices um, that are happening between all of our communities, whether you are Black, Native American, whatever your race is. A lot of our injustices are the same, but there's borders in between them that don't allow us to unite. So the Indigenous Peoples Movement is actually an organization that was founded in, well, not really an organization, but more of a movement in 2018. And of course, you have federally recognized tribes and state recognized tribes. Now, that's also something to understand, that that's what the governments actually recognize, but there are many communities that are not quite recognized, but they are still thriving today. And that's just something very beautiful to see. Here is an actual photo of us in modern day Mystic, Connecticut, myself in the front leading a canoe. And this canoe is actually the largest of its kind. Our indigenous history is so interconnected and rich throughout our waterways and landscapes that today, more than before, people are very interested in not only learning more about our history, but our continued existence. And that is especially when we get into the topics of sustainability on the earth, economical sustainability, societal roles, understanding the harmony and the interconnectedness that we understand. This is something that is really beginning to be sought out. It's been obviously studied throughout the years from different scientists and people like that. But right now, we are looking to really be a part of the discussion, be a part of the leadership, be a part of the decision making, be a part of the plan. And we are doing that, as a people, but it's very important to do that as a human race. Um, and so I have just a little bit of information that's really, about the oral history and perspective of our environment, and our, like I said, our interconnectedness to it. This book was actually launched last week, February 10th, and it's called 50 Plant Medicines, Indigenous Oral History and Perspective. It's available on my website, Mosquito Consulting, the Indigenous Peoples Movement website, and a large percent of the proceeds at the end of the year will go to the Indigenous Peoples Movement. And of course, for all you Amazon Kindle readers, it's available on Kindle. And how anybody can get in contact with me is through the email info@mosquitoconsulting.com, or you can visit the website at www.mosquitoconsulting.com. And of course, Twitter and Instagram, there's the same handle, and Mosquito Consulting LLC on Facebook. So I just really just wanted to just, you know, really, really, really point out through everything that I've really just quickly covered, um, that as Indigenous people, I think it's very important to those that, when they think about us, to know that we still exist, and to know that when we talk about business, or even when we talk about environment, they're both the same from where we come from and our teachings. Our waterways are places that we have always traveled. We call them ancient highways, which is why the topic is called Leveraging Ancient Wisdom and Contemporary Advances, because we have always traveled to trade, whether that was through pelts, furs, shellfish, salmon, fish, jewelry, beads, medicines, all of those different types of things. Our people would travel on these ancient highways for thousands and thousands of years throughout the world. And one of the slides that we had just discussed, I showed you that it was the Hukalea that actually came. And so sometimes the wisdom that is shared is essentially a part of the business as well. Because even though it might not be a monetized product, it's something that is going to be able to help a community sustain itself. And so when you can have a community sustaining itself, they're able to create harmony with the environment. And so I just wanted to be able to share that presentation with all of you, and just really hope that, one thing I'll also like to leave with just really quickly is that it's very important to look around your own community and the areas that you live in. Recognize the land that you're on. Today, there's a lot of land acknowledgement, and I'm very proud to say that today I am actually on a virtual presentation uh, while I'm on my homelands, the Shinnecock people. But no matter where I am, I'll always make sure that I give that land recognition, because that's one, respect to the place that I'm at, respect to the people that are still here, and respect to the people that have once lived here, because there's a harmony within that as well. And it's also important to reach out to the tribes that are around you. There are many businesses that tribal communities have. And I always say that investing in or working with Indigenous people is investing into your environment, because 80% of the Earth's biodiversity is held tenure by indigenous peoples. And if something happens to those indigenous peoples, I think we can take a wild guess of what could happen to that 80% of the Earth's biodiversity, which is what we have left. And here in the United States, um, a lot of that, um, is still held tenure by indigenous peoples, which is why we're seeing indigenous peoples struggle so much because they are really doing everything they can to protect this earth. And that's not just a Native American's job, that's all of our jobs. So, in order to kind of create harmony with the earth, the reconnectedness is people reconnecting with indigenous people, whether that's through business, through relationship, through friendship, through understanding, being good neighbors. That's the best way I think that we can be able to reconnect to the earth. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for having me on here. I'm really excited.
Thank you, Chenae. That was, I mean, I had goosebumps in so many parts as you were speaking and sharing your insights and the real need for us to, as you said, kind of, take care of our earth, right? I have a couple of questions, and if any of the audience have any questions, please don't hesitate to put it in the chat so that we can get them addressed for you. In the meanwhile, I do have a couple of questions about, so as I'm somebody, um, I'm I'm somebody who is an immigrant from India, so the other kind of Indian, and coming here not knowing really too much of the history of the land, and also not having it taught in a real way, right? The history has the real narratives got rewritten through the process of colonization and colonial structures. I was wondering if you could speak to how, I'm sure you can't speak to all tribes, but I was wondering, just based on your knowledge, if you could speak to how we as non-indigenous, non-native people can support the re-indigenization movement, um, in addition to seeking out businesses and things like that. If you had any other resources where we could sort of uncolonize our
Right.
minds. Yeah.
Well, there's so many ways on being able to support that movement. I mean, so many ways. And depending on the person, the capabilities or the capacity that that one individual has, that's going to be very different, right?
Right.
But it really can start with, like I was mentioning just a little earlier, of not talking about us in a past tense. That alone speaks that we still exist. The moment the more and more and more people speak about us in a past tense, it genocides us. It actually contributes to that paper genocide, just like the writing that I said, the last of the Shinnecox. If that were true, I wouldn't be here today. But also, that also allows the continuance of that paper genocide, allows our land to continuously be stolen, our children to feel like they have no role or importance in the world, because every time they go around somewhere, they are an exhibit. It's almost like, wow, it's an Indian. Like, this is real, you know? So I think that that is a big start, is just really talking about us in a present tense. The second part would be, like I mentioned just a tad at the end, is really reaching out to whichever Native communities are around you, right? Everybody that might live here in the United States, there are Native communities that still exist. They might not be like in the forefront or things like that, but it's very important for people to recognize that. And from there, each community might have a specific need. Not every community is going to say, "Oh, okay, we'll do business with you," or "We have this and we have that." I think it's very important to build that relationship with the local community, the local indigenous community, and kind of go from there. You know, I think that that part would actually be a really great start as well.
I completely agree. I was also wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about your book that just came out. Specifically, to put this in context, we did have, when the summit launched in August, we had the amazing honor to have Rose Bear Don't Walk, who was one of the 500 future scientists. Um, I'm butchering that. I'm not saying that right, but she spoke about how, to your point, this, the eradication of native ecosystems has much more far-reaching implications than just about that than just the availability of certain types of foods, right? In terms of health implications and in terms of cultural traditions and things like that. And it's so this is this, and that was the first time I'd heard of it. And now you're also bringing it up. So I was wondering if you could speak more on that and give us a little bit of a teaser while we go get this book.
Yes, I'm super excited because so this book it's about our plant medicines, and it was like my little strategic way of protecting our indigenous plants because the earth is alive, and the sooner people can actually recognize that the earth is alive, the more I feel like people will begin to. Sorry.
For all of our attendees, there we do have a little puppy that decided to join Chenae in her talk. And so we're also hearing from the puppy and the puppy's perspective. Thank you all for your continued patience.
Sorry, I'm so sorry about that. Yes, so the actual the book itself really was just my way of protecting the plants, because when we can really look at the earth like it's alive and people can have that connection with it, um, then people will actually say, you know what, we need to do something about this, and so that was just my way of being able to do that. So I kind of have like very personal stories about some of the plants, and all that. She's going off. I'm sorry, y'all. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Don't apologize. It's completely understandable. Hey, that's the nature of a work from home and virtual summit. It's technical factors as well as living factors, and we have to kind of understand all of them.
Yes, yes. So basically that was just my way of being able to do it. And I'll just share a little teaser, if you will. So I'm sure when people actually purchase the book, they're going to say, oh, well, what plants is going to save my life? What plants can I do to take, right? So the plant that actually inspired me to write the book was eelgrass. And eelgrass is not something that we eat, but eelgrass is actually something that can save our planet. And it's an endangered species right now. And it actually grows on our land, on our Shinnecock land. And it's something that we have done to preserve and protect. It's actually something that the crabs, they lay they nest in there. The different shoreline birds, they have their nests in there. There are very rare species of sea turtles that come all the way up to Shinnecock to nest and lay their eggs in there. And so it's on the marshlands. And like I have mentioned, we never lived like right on the shoreline. But the settlers came and they did, and they still do. So in the Hamptons, right, there's a lot of overdevelopment happening, tons of it. So you don't see as much eelgrass as much anymore. But the eelgrass also helps with coastal flooding so that it doesn't flood and take our shelf life. So that plant was actually the plant that inspired me. And so to us, that's called medicine, because it's not medicine maybe that we eat, but it saves us, and it also saves, it's the medicine for the planet. So we have a job to do, right? To make sure that this still thrives and still exists. Because if something happens to that plant, that means we, as people of the stony shore, didn't uphold our responsibility. And if something happens to the people of the stony shore, then what's going to happen to the stony shore? What's going to happen to that place in the world? So there's little things like that. Of course, I talk about like strawberry, cranberries. I really get into the topics of the history of some of the plants, and how the names that people know, like sassafras, is really our word from the East Coast. Those are things. So really bringing the life back into the plant and allowing people to connect with it. I think that people will really have a deeper connection and understanding of our environment and maybe want to be more curious and spend time in it. And a lot of these plants literally grow in people's backyards. It's not like it's a you have to really go hike up the mountain to see it. You can walk outside your house because they're indigenous.
Wow. That was such a powerful point that I just want to underscore for a quick moment that it doesn't have to be medicine that we ingest for it to heal us all collectively as a planet. And just as we as living entities do need some things to keep our systems in homeostasis, the earth does as well. The waterways do as well. The air does as well. And while we are, it goes back to what you and I were talking about right before we went live, right? The interconnectedness of all of this, understanding that really, really, truly understanding our place in the larger ecosystem and understanding that we are only the latest additions to that ecosystem and not the creators of it. I think that is such a powerful, powerful point. Do you have any? We do have a couple of comments. Ben said, always love hearing you speak, Chenae. Ben from Clubhouse, Ben Mervis. And then Dr. Brian said, indeed, we are all responsible for taking care of the earth. And then Leslie said, thank you for sharing this. It is so important that this is amplified so that, like you said, some of these ancient ways can be restored so that we can conserve the earth. Global warming is here. Do you have any thoughts or responses to them particularly?
Yes, I just want to say thank you all for just tuning in and just, giving me my flowers and affirmations. I will say that I guess can still say that I'm a young adult, and I think it's very important to continuously encourage us young people. And also, as far as the global warming and the environment, again, I can't stress this enough that it's not a Native American problem. So when we're out there fighting for the pipelines and sacred sites, yes, we might have a family tie to that sacred site, but we know that that sacred site is very important for the rest of the world. So that really takes all of us being able to come together. And so I really hope that this book that I'm doing, the work that you're doing, the people that are in here, we are able to kind of not come together as a network, but as a human race, as a people, because the earth is in need of it, because we take from her every single day, and she's not going to be able to continuously give us any more if we don't give back, to her.
Yeah. And I do have, actually, you raised a point that I do have a question on out of curiosity as a mother to a young child, knowing that my child is now going to go through this formalized education system where she is going to learn about the paper genocide and the talking about indigenous people in the past and things like that. How do we as parents to young children go about educating them about indigenous peoples and the various tribes and all of that, with while appreciating the culture without appropriating the cultures?
So the first thing I mean, our children are children at the, and I think that what we can do for anything, especially in this world that we live in, beyond just the topic of paper genocide, but there's a whole lot of things too, right? That when they leave our we too, when they leave our home, all we can do is help them have a strong mind, and when they have that strong mind, they'll be able to know what's really, really good, you know what I mean, and what's not, but also know how to deal with and confront it without causing any more harm to themselves, to the person that's teaching them, to the people that's listening. And so, really, when it comes down to it, I think exposure to the diversity is always helpful. One thing that, my non Indigenous friends growing up and friends now is that they've always said, well, my mother and my dad, they always took us to a powwow, they always took us to a Native museum, and not only that, but they actually help their child have relationship with Native people. And that alone was able to, now you'll see that these same people stand on the front lines with Native people. These same people might run for office and help to create policy to help Native people because they had a friend. They had an understanding of the culture, regardless what a teacher is going to say, because it's in a curriculum. That child became, whether they were Native or not, they became someone to rewrite that curriculum, you know, and that's hard as a young kid because they're going to come home with questions. But nowadays, kids have access to this cell phone at a young age. So they're able to see things and start to learn things on their own that no one's really teaching them. They're kind of doing it themselves. So I think that just the exposure to the diversity will really help strengthen the mind and understanding that that child is going to have with a people, and to also see that these people exist. They have moms and dads and, children and cousins, and, they're people just like you, but they have a culture and they preserve it, and they need us to work with them so that it can work for all of us. And that's something that I think that, because, kids get passionate about things, you know, and that, I think that's the best thing I can say.
I love that. I love that. And these are exactly the kind of questions that, at least, on a personal note, like that we are grappling with. Um, and especially because for us, we also have to kind of delineate the confusion when we say Indian, and it's Indian and Indian, we are Indian, and to kind of really um, honor all of the cultural differences there while highlighting the different cultural traditions and the heritages and all of that. So it's you've given me a lot to think about, and I feel like you've given our audience members a lot to think about too. So I would love to get your closing thoughts. And before that, again, before I forget, thank you so much for taking this time. I know you are back with your family for a very particular reason. So within that, to take this time is, I'm truly grateful. So thank you for that. And I'd love to kind of hear your closing thoughts.
Yes, I really thank you for saying that, because one thing that's important to note is that, we each individually have a responsibility, right? And that's to help with the betterment at this point of the world, and the universe and how that works. So no matter what is going on and no matter what's happening, it's always kind of, it's important to focus on what it is that you're supposed to be here to do. Because I think, like, sometimes that's a very simple way of really looking at things, because the moment we kind of things get very overwhelming and complicated, and then depression sinks in and all that, because a lot of that is taking us away from the environment, it's taking us away from each other, it's taking us away from all of that. So some things, I think, like the book that I wrote helped me kind of channel and, do those different types of things. So I think for what is it's great for people to take away, one, don't talk about us in a past tense. Don't talk about us just during Columbus Day, Indigenous Peoples Day, or Thanksgiving. Really see us as a people, as a living culture, but also really see that our traditional ways are really for all humanity. And Indigenous people are throughout the entire world, you know, um, but we have had a hard time of really letting people know that we still exist because we have been taken away from having a voice, So I just wanted to leave everybody with that and just say thank you. Definitely go check out my book on my website, and follow me on Instagram, and just, utilize me as a resource if I might be the first person that you've ever kind of had in contact with this, or just, do some research on your own homelands, in your own backyard, and connect, because now more than ever, we all need to be able to connect in a harmonic way.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Sinead. Again, this was such an honor, and it was such a, it was so insightful. And I know that our speakers are also, or I'm sorry, our audience is also saying the same thing. We have Shay that said, this was so interesting, Sinead. I have a lot to learn and I'm excited to learn. And Leslie said, yes, when we were talking about teaching our kids and the exposure to the diversity so that they can grow up knowing that going back to your point about like connecting with people, having relationships with them, and having friends, and then being a good friend, really, by standing up in solidarity, for cultures that are still here but have been rendered invisible through so many historical structures. So I think those are all really great takeaways and actionable items that, regardless of our age or our kids' ages, we can all start implementing now. So again, thank you so much, Nate. I know you do have to get back to your family. So with that, we are going to do, I did get a note yesterday that when we just closed off without anything, it was cutting off the last few bits of our conversation. So I'm going to also end with that 30-second countdown this time. So we're going to start and end with a 30-second countdown to make sure that all of the content is contained within that. So with that, we will see you in about 15 minutes at the next session with Ruthie Bowles. In the meanwhile, please feel free to check out our community at C3EB Club, where we are building a lot more ongoing conversations and ongoing discussions, trainings, and other resources on a weekly basis, because these kind of conversations about the interconnectedness of the problems we have in equity and inclusion and the solutions that we need have to be ongoing. They can't happen once a year. To Sinead's point, a particular point about thinking about Native American people on 1 or 2 or 3 days. No, we have to think about these issues and the problems and the solutions every single day. And so that is the community that we're building. That is the community that you'll find at C3EB Club. So I do invite you to check that out. And we will be back in about 15 minutes with our next speaker. And I hope you all enjoyed this. Don't hesitate to reach out to Chenae if you want to connect with her. And with that, thank you all so much.